Well, thanks for having me. I think that it's something that's been on the front burner unexpectedly. I'm not surprised that the senators are raising it at this point because we've, over the years, talked about debt sustainability. I know one ratio that Nigeria always looks at is the fact that our debt to GDP numbers look still within maybe our comparables. So if you look at the mint nations, so we're in the early 20s, and most of them are around the same place. And then even if you look at the BRIC nations or the more advanced countries, debt to GDP is really very high, and we argue that.
Of course, the big difference is that they are borrowing at much cheaper rates, and of course, the debt to service ratio in Nigeria is a lot higher.
Absolutely. And then you look at debt to revenue. In terms of debt to revenue, we're not doing well. If you look at
debt to revenue, actually.
Yeah, yes. So if you look at debt to revenue where you're spending 63% of your revenue paying servicing debt, now that's precarious. So I think the challenge is that first, we have a revenue challenge. We're not making enough money.
Right.
That's
so we need to fix that.
We need to fix that. Secondly, we have an infrastructure gap that needs to be funded, okay? And then you have a ballooning debt situation. So what do? You have to fix the revenue problem, and then you have to find ingenious ways of funding the much-needed infrastructure.
So let's talk about funding, and beyond even just infrastructure, just simply funding the budget. Now, over the last 4 years, I think one area that disappointed a lot of people with the Buhari administration was it did appear that they were really slow in moving in the way of privatizing government assets, maybe concessioning them. Do you get the sense that we're going to move in that direction? Is it inevitable over the next 4 years?
Well, I want to believe that for them now, for the government now, it's inevitable. I could understand the first 4 years. So there's a race between the next election and your achievements. So you take the quick fix. What's the quick fix? You borrow money and tie a few roads and all that. That's a quick fix. But now the president is not going to contest another election himself. Maybe his party will, but not him. So this is the time to take a long-term view of how you settle the issue of funding the budget. So you need to do concessions. They take time, but you need to do them now. You need to also privatize some assets that will get you some fund to fund the deficits that you have in the budget. And then you need to also find a way of using the balance sheet of the federal government in a more ingenious way. So why not look at PPPs and then do guarantees? So have the projects fund themselves while all the government does is guaranteed, so you have a contingent liability and not a straight-up liability that is debt.
I think another area that people perhaps don't talk so much about in terms of the advantages of privatizing government assets is the efficiency it brings to the management of those assets. So take, for instance, maybe it may be a long shot to expect that the government will privatize the ports, but it brings so much more efficiency. The government has to spend a lot less and get a lot more back.
Absolutely. I mean, today, sometimes I read on social media where people argue back and forth about the pros and the cons of privatization. And the first thing I say is that if not for privatization, the device you're using to have that conversation wouldn't even be in your hands.
So
if we still had NITEL, perhaps we won't be here. So see where we've gone with just making it private. Same thing. Government has to look at things that don't fall into national security and begin to privatize those. So we built new airports, and they are beautiful. It takes you back to when the airport was built in Ikeja. And it was a beautiful airport in the 70s. Where is it now? So what's going to happen to those airports going forward? My take, concession them immediately. Let the private sector bring in the private sector efficiency. Government should work by getting taxes from the concessionaires and getting concession agreements that they pay levies and taxes and all sorts. So you make some money, reduce the workforce so that you're reducing your recurrent expenditure. Don't forget, we have also in all of this increased minimum wage.
Right, and we have to fund it.
It has to be funded. Clearly has to be funded. Where is it going to be funded from? I can't see except we become more ingenious in the ways the government does business. Government must understand that I personally believe that government has no business in business. Let the private sector run the business, let the government regulate. Except when you have specialist type of business or national security and government can run that. But other things, concession them, privatize them.
Since we have you in the studio today, I know that your business has dealt with many state governments in the past. So let's take this conversation to the states as well, because they also have to fund their budgets.
Yes.
They also have to pay the minimum wage.
Yes.
How do you see things playing out for the states over the next 4 years? In terms of their approach to funding their budgets and building infrastructure?
Same thing for the states. The states have to be creative. There's an opportunity for states to find projects that are bankable, that are viable, and let them run under the PPP model. So if you have a road that has a lot of traffic, and you can think about it, can you combine with a private sector operator, fix the road, toll the road, and make some revenue, and they're able to pay the funding for it? Can the government, state government, use their ISPO as a guarantee to raise money, fix infrastructure, but repay it from the cash flow of that project? Everybody has to, it's no longer business as usual. It can't be. The states can't wait for largesse from Abuja anymore. Right. It won't work. Any state that tries that will probably owe salaries for a long time. So what the states need, the governors need to be creative. I'm hoping that they will appoint commissioners of finance who understand what finance is all about and how to raise much needed capital. Capital formation is a challenge in this climate. But there are solutions. There are ways of going around it. There are ways of using the private sector. There are ways of using the capital market. There are ways of issuing bonds. There are ways of issuing contingent liabilities. There are ways of using multilateral funds to fund projects that bring succor to the people and achievements to the government, right, and cash flows that fund the source of fund.
My sense, though, is that in the short term, we're probably going to still go the borrowing route, at least for the federal budget. And in your view, what would be the implications of that? My sense, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the funds simply will not be enough. We're going to have a challenge with cash.
Well, my sense is, don't go borrowing so much, all right? I think that, so what the government has done, so I could give a particular example. So you think about a road like the Lagos-Benin Express Road. Right. Now, a lot of work has been done on that road over the past years, right? And some parts of the road is already fixed. So you have borrowed to do that. Some part of it was sukuk, some part of it was borrowing from previous governments, and you're funding that borrowing. My take is this: concession the road. Get a concessionaire to take over the road, take over the debt, toll the road, and use the cash flow to pay the debts. All government does is just to provide a guarantee and stand as a guarantor to the debt holders. That way, you're not borrowing anymore. So you can find ways of refinancing some existing debts by just concessioning some of this infrastructure, especially those that spew cash flows. That's
well, we certainly look forward to some of that innovation in addressing these budget challenges this time around. Thank you so much for coming in this